Um, I must say it was nice you to bring along the beauty of the family, Maeve. You brought her along last night, but you didn't bring her with you this morning, did you?
No, it's Mother's Day in Ireland, and
That's right.
she's back home on the phone, back in the hotel on the phone to my two daughters and my grandchildren. So very early this morning we got a text by WhatsApp congratulating her on Mother's Day.
How many kids you got?
I've got two children,
Two daughters.
one 26. She has a partner, and we've two grandchildren, and they live only 500 yards from us.
Oh, great.
And my other daughter is a nurse in the Mater Private in Dublin, and she's 25.
How did you get into government? I know you explained it last night.
Well, it was interesting. I mean, I was always into soccer. Where I live was a big soccer area.
Which was?
Dundalk, just halfway between Dublin and Belfast, and I played, competitive soccer from very early on. And when I went to college, I played for UCD. When I came home to Dundalk, qualified as a lawyer. I became involved in my community. There was a lot of building going on. Our local field that we played on was bulldozed overnight by developers who owned the field, but we played on it. So there was a big lobby in the community. Each club, including the soccer club, were asked if they would nominate one person to go on a community council. I was chosen. I became the chairman of the community council. That was in 1977. There was an election coming up in 1979. Because I was chairing all these monster meetings about community facilities, the local Fianna Fáil Common approached me. My mother was Fianna Fáil, my father would have been a Fine Gael from Cork.
Mixed marriage?
A mixed marriage to a certain extent, yeah. My mother came from a very strong Republican family in Dundalk. So they asked me would I go. At the time I was a newly qualified solicitor and lawyer, and I said sure, I'll give it a go. It might do my business no harm, and lo and behold I got elected, and I was a councillor, a local councillor from 79 until 91 in fact, but in 86, even though I could have gone earlier, I particularly didn't want to go in those early years because I was newly married. I decided to go for election in 87. I got elected as a national politician.
So your ascent up the political ladder was quite rapid, actually.
It was rapid enough, although I was a member of the parliament for 10 years before I got ministerial recognition.
I want to talk to you about it. You've served as Minister for Justice, Minister for Equality Law Reform, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Communications, Marine and Natural Resources, Minister of Social, Community and Family Affairs. Which one of those ministerial positions did you really enjoy the most?
Yeah, I often get asked that question, and I enjoy them all. I'm being honest about that, and people would think that probably Foreign Affairs was probably that might be their choice because you've all this foreign travel, and it was the case that in most of the years I was Minister for Foreign Affairs, I travelled the world. I was in every continent. I was in virtually every country. 1 year alone, I travelled 50% of all government travel. I travelled even more than our Prime Minister and all the other ministers put together. But it was quite stressful because you were in the air all the time. I like justice because being a lawyer, I felt I could do things in that department. I really enjoyed social welfare, social security, because it was a time when we were able to increase benefits for people. And I also enjoyed the telecommunications, marine telecommunications and energy, because again, that was a time when there was a lot to do in relation to trying to create all-island structures whereby, North and South would work together from an economic point of view on things like electricity, like telecommunications and other things. So if you were to put me on the spot, I probably would say justice, in that I was coming back home in effect.
It was your line of work.
Yeah, because my mother really didn't want me going into politics because, she and my father sacrificed a lot to put me through law because we had come from a teacher's background. My father was a teacher, secondary teacher. My elder brother became a secondary teacher. So when I came out to go to college, my father I said, I don't want to do teaching. He couldn't understand this. I said, I want to do the next quickest thing in college that's not teaching. And what was that? Law. I wanted to get out of college as quickly as possible. I wanted to be a professional footballer. So my father didn't want me doing law because in those days you had to actually pay to become apprentice to lawyers, and to get on in law you needed quite a lot of influence. But in the end I got my way and I did law, and now my older brother who started out as a teacher in his career, he became a barrister, which is the person with the wig and gown, the funny wigs that you don't have here in America, and then shortly after he became a solicitor himself, and then my youngest sister became a solicitor as well, a lawyer as well. So we in one generation we turned from teachers to lawyers.
Oh, great. Let me talk to you about when you were chairman of the British-Irish Inter-Parliamentary Body. What was that?
That was a body that was set up between the Parliament in Southern Ireland and the House of Commons and the House of Lords in London. And basically 25 politicians from the South and 25 politicians from the UK sat on a biannual basis in different locations to discuss issues of common concern. And it was criticised at the start of, being sort of a bit of a junket. I don't know if you have that word here in America.
Oh yeah.
But to be honest, I regarded it as a very good vehicle for particularly the British parliamentarians to see that, we weren't all rabble-rousers in Ireland, and we got to know people of stature in the UK on friendly terms. So from that point of view, I think it got rid of a lot of myths that were hanging around, and it meant that politicians in Ireland who were on that body became much more understanding of the British point of view, and vice versa.
Now, would that have led to the participation in the political talks between Sinn Fein and the IRA and the UDF in the north of Ireland?
Well, as I said earlier, I was elected first to national politics in 1987, and Charlie Haughey was the Taoiseach at the time and the Prime Minister. And I was born, bred and still live about 5 or 6 miles from the border, so I would have had a very keen interest in that area. And when I became when I was elected, I received a call from Charlie Haughey, the secretary, to come up to his office, and it was a bit of a shock at the time because what was happening in the north was John Hume was meeting with Gerry Adams. John Hume was the leader of the SDLP and Gerry Adams was the leader of Sinn Fein. They weren't in the political sphere at that time. John Hume was getting pretty bad abuse from the media and from most of the commentariat that he shouldn't be meeting someone like Gerry Adams and the IRA representatives, basically. Cardinal Tommaso Fee, who was the cardinal at the time, he's dead now, he asked Charlie Haughey if we in the South could mirror the same talks that were going on between Hume and Adams. So basically, Haughey was asked, would he send a delegation in secret to meet with Adams and Sinn Féin to try and bring them into the political process rather than the paramilitary process. So those talks took place in my hometown in 1988, and they were secret for 10 years. They didn't come out, and at the same time, just to follow on, a year later I was also asked to meet with UDA and UVF paramilitaries. They're loyalist paramilitaries. They were the other side of the equation. They were the people, the counterparts of the IRA, basically. Yeah, and these were very dangerous times because there were terrible atrocities.
Did this lead to the Good Friday Agreement?
Well, ultimately it did. I mean, there were a lot of steps on the way, but ultimately it led to a situation where all the parties, as I said last night in my speech, who couldn't even stand in the same room. They eventually sat down together and sat down in government and are there in government to this day.
Why did Bill Clinton get so heavily involved in that, would you say?
Well,
was it lobbying from this country?
I think it's lobbying from this, and the fact that he was very conscious that there was a very strong lobby here in America. I said in my words last night that it's very important that ordinary Irish Americans at every occasion remind their public representatives that the pressure needs to be kept on. But I firmly believe that, and I say this as somebody who's from the border areas only for the American intention, you would not have got the serious intent from the British to try and solve this problem. The American involvement, I think, put pressure on the British.
Do you think it gave it more legitimacy?
Oh, absolutely. And it also internationalised it, because up to that it was just seen as, a sort of an irritant country, Ireland, causing the British problems on their doorstep. And yet the fact that the Americans came in with, all guns blazing, all the major names.
And the appointment of George Mitchell.
George Mitchell, and Ted Kennedy, Richie Neal was a congressman who paid a huge amount of attention. There were endless names who were interested in Ireland. And, the fact that so many people claim Irish descent in America is a huge pressure on their public representatives to, pay attention to the Irish issue.
But a lot of people at the time thought that 400 years of conflict in the north of Ireland was going to be very difficult to solve. Something like is going on in the Middle East now, of course. It's a lot longer than that.
But you can never say never. And there's one thing that I said, that there were some very dark days, some incredible atrocities where, people were blown up, the Shankill bombing, where the IRA blew up and killed 9 people and injured many, many more. There was Loch Gall, there was all sorts of other events that took place on both sides.
Do I recall Charlie Haughey being accused of gun running at one time?
He was, yes.
And he was the Prime Minister
and
of
there
Fianna
was yes, that was way back previously, because there was a conflict going on, and there was a conflagration, and there was ethnic cleansing in Northern Ireland in those days. I'm not in any way justifying. He wasn't found guilty of anything. There was always that suspicion. But there was, an onus on people in the Republic to, in effect, try and look after nationalists who were being burned out of their homes. I remember as a youngster, in my early teens, hundreds and hundreds of families coming across the border with just the clothes on their backs, because they had been burned out of their homes in Belfast. And in fact, in my hometown, to this day, there are housing estates which were built by the government of the day in the very early 70s to in effect house these people, because at the start when they came across the border they were housed in halls, like parochial halls, and then eventually they had to be housed in homes, and the homes were very, very quickly provided. It has to be said, the homes that were built in those days were very flimsy homes, and they weren't suitable, so they had to be renovated very dramatically over the years.
How did you get along with John Hume, and what kind of a person was he?
Well, John Hume to me was probably one of my greatest political heroes, because,
Would you call him a pacifist?
Oh, absolutely. John Hume, I think, put it in succinctly. Like most Irish people want a united Ireland. Most Irish people believe that it's absolutely nonsensical having a border, which we were subject to. It was only on our doorstep. That there's only 6 million people altogether on a small island, and we can't live together as one. So it makes no sense, in my view, and I think most Irish people, would want a united Ireland. But John Hume said it's not a matter of uniting the territory. It's uniting the people that live on the territory, and the only way you'll do that is by negotiation and understanding of their position. And I said in a few words last night, a campaign of violence on both sides, but a campaign on violence by we say the IRA, to bomb and to shoot a reluctant minority of unionists who want to remain as part of the United Kingdom. To try and bomb them into United Ireland is completely counterproductive to the ideal of a United Ireland. There's no way in which, people who are injured and who have their family members killed, there's no way they're going to be part of a United Ireland.
Do you think Gerry Adams and Martin McGuinness prolonged the conflict or shortened it in Northern Ireland?
No, I think they shortened it. In fact, they would be
they
would be political opponents of mine, but I have to give them credit for, going basically from, at the start of that, famously Danny Morrison said, we'll proceed with the Armalite in the one hand and the ballot box in the other. And that went on for 20 years. And, for those of us who have the same aspiration as a United Ireland, but who are adamant that it can only be done by peaceful and constitutional means, you can't have it both ways. You put down the Armalite and you immerse yourselves fully in politics, or else you stay out in the cold and you stay as paramilitaries and have a military campaign. And in those early talks in 1988 that I participated with Dr. Martin Mansura and a man called Richie Healy on behalf of Fianna Fáil, and Gerry Adams and Pat Doherty and Mitchell McLaughlin were for Sinn Fein. I mean, those are the type of arguments we made, that you have to put down the gun. Now, they would have arguments against that. They would have arguments as to why this all happened, because of the very strong discrimination that was meted out by the Unionists, by the British to the nationalist population of Northern Ireland. But in my view, if you have to move forward, the only way you can move forward is through negotiation and understanding. That has happened. The unfortunate thing that's happened in Northern Ireland is that those parties who were in the middle, John Hume's party and the Ulster Unionist Party led by David Trimble, they were leading the charge on this issue. They're now out in the cold, and the two parties who were in the extremes, Dr. Paisley's party, the DUP, and also Sinn Féin on the other side, they're now in government, whereas the two parties who were making all these points 20 years ago, they're out in the cold, and the Ulster Unionist Party are a very small party now, and the SDLP are not in great shape.